From downtown Milwaukee, welcome to Money Talk with Bob Landaas. Each week, professional advisors from Landaas & Company Investments discuss the latest financial developments, offering timely insight and long-term perspective.
This is Money Talk for Friday, November 29th, the day after Thanksgiving. Also the day after I just gave up trying to go on the diet. Checking the Weight Watchers calendar, the Bucks are home with the Wizards Saturday night, and the Domes are all decked out for the holidays. And this weekend, the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra is accompanying the film The Muppet Christmas Carol at the Bradley Symphony Center. And the holiday shopping season is officially underway. Now to a story from Florida. We miss Florida. In 1990, a woman who pleaded guilty to dressing as a clown and murdering the wife of the man whom she would later marry has been released from a Florida prison. The family gatherings must be a hoot. In Canada, a grade school student brought a live, historic explosive device to school for show and tell. In the kid's defense, he didn't know it was a live bomb. You'd think that tragedy averted would be the sensational headline of the day. But this is Canada, and they are so nice. The cops, administrators, and reporters for the local newspaper simply noted the quiet and orderly evacuation of the building. Canadians are so nice. Finally, in Germany, surprisingly, they are crazy for pizza. In Dusseldorf, there's a pizza joint. When you wanted the special, you ordered the number 40. What made it so special? The number 40 came with a side order of cocaine. Just to be clear, whether it's pickup or delivery, coke is still illegal in Germany. The criminal investigators told the reporters it was one of their best-selling pizzas. On the podcast today, we have Steve Giles, Art Rothschild, and with a look back, here's Kyle Tedding.
Well, thanks, Max. We're recording this post-Thanksgiving podcast a little early, so no closing numbers, but really an opportunity to do probably what's my favorite podcast of the year every year. We touch on a part of our business that I think is so critical to our communities, our families, our neighbors, and that is how we give away our money. At this time of year, so important to give thanks for all we have on what has been another incredibly strong year. I think even easier to kind of make some commitments that maybe we haven't done in the past at a time when there's plenty of excess to go around. There's plenty of fruit to be harvested. And so, I think I'd start the podcast, I think, as we do every year now, and just reminding our listeners that this is not meant to be construed as tax advice. These can be incredibly complicated topics, and our goal is simply to scratch the surface on what opportunities are out there. Very important that you have very directed and individual conversations with your tax preparers, with us, about how it might impact your specific situation. But again, I think many of these, if not all of them, are things that might apply. The easiest, of course, in terms of giving is just to simply find charitable organizations that you know, that you love, that you trust, and write them a check, hand them cash, give them your time. But that isn't always the most tax-efficient way. It doesn't always give us the biggest tax benefit compared to some of the other options that are out there. And, of course, I always tell clients we don't give money away to save on taxes. But where we're giving money away, we want to get the best tax bang for our buck we can get. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this day after Thanksgiving just walking through what some of those look like. Steve, maybe one of the highlights for us at a time of year in which we've seen such strong gains. We have so many securities in our portfolio that have appreciated meaningfully relative to what we paid for them. Potentially just giving away shares of securities from accounts that might otherwise face tax. Tell me a little bit about why it's such a great opportunity and how we go about it.
Yeah, as we all know, when we invest, we always invest for growth, Kyle. And of course, when we sell those investments, we do have to pay our capital gains tax on the money we make. For example, if we make an investment of $10,000, we sell it later for $15,000, we made $5,000, and we have to pay our capital gains tax when we file. The point that you're alluding to with respect to gifting is if we were to instead gift that $15 to a charitable organization, we have the benefit of also gifting the basis. So we no longer have to pay the tax liability on that gain because it is now going to be absorbed by the charity. And since they are a 501c3 organization, they don't have to pay the tax. So for those individuals that want to trim winners, they want to reduce maybe some highly appreciated assets in their taxable accounts. These would be joint accounts, individual accounts, trust accounts, anything that is not a retirement account. You can do so by gifting the shares. I think that's a great starting point for this gifting podcast.
And of course, the reminder we always give is make sure you get your receipts so that you have a record of that gift. And additionally, make sure the charity knows it's coming, because what you don't want to happen is for you to give that marvelous gift of that appreciated security. It sits in the charity's account because the transactional actual steps are that you are literally delivering that security from your account into theirs. If it sits around and all of a sudden the share price falls, well, your intention to give them that $15,000 might turn into a gift that's 14 or 13 or 12 if we're having a bad day. And all of a sudden what you intended for them to receive is not what they're ultimately able to spend. And so important that they know it's there, important that they know that probably makes sense for them to now go ahead and sell that position and allocate it either to the cash that they're going to need for their spending and or towards whatever that higher purpose is. Art, the way for some of our older clients, potentially the best way for some of our older clients, those over 70 and a half, to do giving, maybe an even better opportunity than those appreciated assets. Instead of avoiding capital gains, if you can give money from your IRA, now potentially you're avoiding income, or the income tax rather. And so those qualified charitable distributions that I know many of our clients are aware of, potentially an even better opportunity to give away money that you were intending to give away anyways.
Yeah, for any number of reasons, this has become my favorite way to give money to charity. And it's also become a very popular way for many of our clients to give money away. It has a number of advantages over the gift of appreciated property. And the primary one is if you have to take minimum distributions anyway. By the way, you have to be 70 and a half for this to apply. It's not, as you've pointed out before, it's not the year in which you turn 70 and a half. It's like you literally have to be 70 and a half years old to qualify for this. Number one. Number two, the money comes out of your IRA. It has to go directly to the charity, either by a check from the custodian, or you can get checkbooks. It's one of our favorite things to do is to get our clients checkbooks. They can write the checks to charity out of their IRA. The only caveat is you got to make sure you have the cash in the money market so the check's clear. Another point about that is make sure it clears before the end of the year, or it won't be counted against your minimum, for that year. So that's important. Beyond that, make sure you don't go over $105,000 this year. That goes up next year to $109,000 or something like that. But this is why I think it's better even than a gift of appreciated property. You're offsetting income, especially if it's your minimum distribution, that you'd otherwise have to take from your IRA. That's ordinary income, minimum distribution. So if your minimum distribution for the year is $20,000, if you're really charitable, give the whole $20,000 away. You don't have to pay tax. And the charity benefits. And so to me, it's just the best thing to do to get a tax deduction. And the problem also with gifts of appreciated property and other direct cash gifts is you're only going to benefit if you're itemizing. And most people today are taking standard deductions, and the standard deduction for a married couple is $29,200, for a single individual $14,600 this year, plus there are additional deductions for being over age 65 or blind is another $1,500 each, or $1,550 each. So this way you can have your cake and eat it too.
No, I think the qualified charitable distribution as a vehicle is such an important gifting opportunity. And something that you relied on early, Art, was those checkbooks, the ability for the client to just go ahead and write the checks as they feel so compelled. And I've had a number of clients tell me, hey, I was sitting at this charity auction and didn't win all the things I wanted to win, but I still wanted to give them some money, and I happened to have my checkbook with me, so I just went ahead and wrote that check. It's something that, to your point, if you're not itemizing, yeah, you can write the check and give it away, and you might get a little benefit. If it's money you had to take out of the IRA anyways, it was going to show up as income. Well, now it's money that's never going to be taxed as income. The charity obviously doesn't pay the tax either. A couple of important caveats for those charitable distributions: it cannot go to private foundations. It cannot go to donor-advised funds. But for the most part, your 501c3s, your church, your humane society, they're all eligible to receive those gifts. And you'd be amazed at how many people I have that do their monthly gift to church or to chapel or to synagogue just directly out of that IRA because it's money they have to take anyway.
I would point out too, Kyle, that when you receive your 1099 at the end of the year, the custodian is only showing how much money came out of the IRA. You should make sure that you hang on to those receipts or the confirmation of your donation that you're writing with your QCD check so that you can prove when you file that the money that came out did indeed go to one of these organizations, so you don't pay the tax on the distribution.
It is a consistent question we get. Why does my 1099-R, that tax document at the end of the year, why does it show that I took out all that money, I gave it all away to charity? Well, Pershing or your other IRA custodians don't differentiate between what you took for your purposes and what you gave away to charity. They can't. They're not verifying who's an eligible charity and who isn't. That's up to you via the receipts. That's up to you through your filing. When you put together your 1040, you're going to say, here's how much money came out. Here's what's from that 1099-R. And then right next to it, you're going to write down, here's how much of that is taxable. And so you are doing the math via those receipts, via that record keeping that you're doing, that you're keeping with your tax return. You are doing the math as the taxpayer to say, no, here is what I gave to charity. I mentioned that donor-advised funds can't be funded with qualified charitable distributions, but maybe just a word for a second on donor-advised funds. Not a terribly common vehicle for most of our investors, but especially for those that have maybe a once-in-a-lifetime sale of a business, a once-in-a-lifetime income stream, where they have a large tax bill in a year that's going to push them into a far higher tax bracket than what they've ever had before. You can make a commitment to what's called a donor-advised fund, which is just basically a separate account, a carved-out account that allows you to get the full benefit of that gift in 1 year, but allows you to stretch out the actual giving from the donor-advised fund over some longer period of time. We've seen substantial growth both in the giving from those donor-advised funds as well as the underlying assets. What we have found over time is that you have the opportunity to again, benefit from that gift in a year in which you might be in a higher tax bracket, but not maybe make the full financial commitment to a charitable organization that might not be ready for it, or charitable organizations that might not be ready for it. Of course, some expenses associated with maintaining that donor-advised fund, some extra restrictions because the custodian for the donor-advised fund is actually making sure that the money is going to appropriate places. So you have to be careful. But in another way, potentially, that especially for making larger contributions, you can put some money aside.
Yeah, and understand also, Kyle, that's not a double dip. You don't get to claim the deduction in the year you might make the contribution to the donor advised fund and then also claim another deduction when you funnel that money to the charity 2, 3 years, 4 years post.
I think that is such an important point to understand is there's no free lunch in our tax code and you're only going to get it once. So maybe the final piece, this is the time of year not only when we're talking about charitable giving as we have for the first portion of this, but in which we're often looking toward how do we make sure that the giving to our family falls within the best possible opportunities, things like how much can I give in a year? Things like what kind of gifts should I consider? Art, I know this is a conversation you have with clients as they're looking to their kids and grandkids and going, this isn't money I need. Perhaps I want to pass it along to future generations.
Yeah, and charity begins in the home. I've been reminded of that any number of times. And you can give up to $18,000 per donee this year per person. So a husband and wife can split gifts and give money to each of their kids, and you can go even further and give it to the spouses of each kid. So you can give away.
You can go even further and give it to a colleague too, Art.
I think there may be limits on that, so we're not going to consider that. But the problem oftentimes with that, people like accumulating wealth, and they're a little tight with giving it away sometimes. Other times they have appreciated property. And so they would have to sell it, or they can give that appreciated property away to their children or grandchildren or whatever. 529 plans. There are higher limits for what you can give away to grandkids or whatever, and 529 plans is something to consider. And if you go over those amounts, there's not usually going to be a tax to pay. You just have to file a tax return. The limit's like $13 million right now under current law that you can give away. And so I have had clients go over before they file a tax return. There's a gift tax exclusion equivalent, from a credit is the way it's calculated. So you can give away millions of dollars if you have it, but you have to be willing to part with it. And it's amazing how many people, once they get wealthy, they want their kids to do it themselves. But I think definitely think about your kids and grandkids, help them get their starter homes, buy cars, help your grandkids go to college. It's a wonderful time of year to be thinking about that.
I'm always amazed at how many different opinions I hear on that, right? That there are certainly conversations I've had where it's, well, I earned mine and they're going to get it eventually, but they're going to have to work for it right now. And I absolutely respect that. The other side I hear is, well, I don't want my kids to have to struggle the way I did, or I don't want my grandkids to have massive amounts of student debt the way my kids did or the way I did. And I think there isn't a right answer there. It's entirely about understanding who you're giving money to, how you want them to spend it, how you want them to be able to enjoy it, and then do it in a way, whether it's through those annual limits of $18,000 per person this year, moving to $19,000 per person in 2025. And as you mentioned, that's a husband and wife potential limit, going to potentially maybe a daughter and son-in-law or son and daughter-in-law, potentially going to grandkids as well. And so you start to multiply that. Those numbers can add up pretty quick just within that annual limit. Then you add in that lifetime exclusion you're talking about. It comes with additional record keeping, but not that painful, especially if you're not doing your own taxes. There is all kinds of potential for giving, with the one caveat being if you're counting on those those annual limits, that $18,000 I was talking about, don't go right up to that 18, because the IRS is going to come back at some point if they're ever auditing you and go, so you didn't give any other gifts during that tax year. You didn't give them a Christmas present or a birthday present or take them out to dinner. They really are looking at the annual amount of gifts that were given in that year. We always say, hey, if the limit's 18, maybe go up to 17.5 and save a little space for that conversation should it ever happen. And then Steve, Art was talking about 529 plans, and this is a new one for us. But for a long time, we had maybe shied away from 529 plans, given some of the restrictions that are there. But now this ability potentially to use 529s as a vehicle for funding retirement accounts maybe makes it a little more attractive again, especially for grandparents looking potentially to help their grandkids either save for college or get a little head start on retirement.
Yeah, one of the biggest hurdles with savers, young parents, or even grandparents of putting money into those college 529 plans is whether or not the dollars are going to be used. Why should I put money into an account if my kid is going to be so smart they're going to get a scholarship, or they're going to be the star athlete on whatever sports team and they're going to get that full ride to Madison? Or maybe they just don't go. But those are all, concerns that parents and grandparents have. Well, these new rules with the 529 plans allow for the shifting of 529 plan dollars that have not been used into a Roth IRA retirement for the beneficiary. Obviously, there are some caveats. The account has to be open for 15 years. Obviously, you're going to be limited to the annual contribution limits for Roth accounts, and the beneficiary does have to have a job. They do have to have income. But I think it helps to alleviate some of the questions and concerns that the contributor may have as to whether or not these dollars are going to be wasted by putting them into the college-specific 529 in the first place.
I think just so important to understand that there is such a wide range of opportunities out there for giving, whether it's to charity, whether it's to family, whether it's to colleagues, Art, if that's what you're so compelled to do. I think absent a very clear conversation on what you're trying to accomplish, yeah, great to have some ideas, but it really is helpful to sit down and talk about, what do I want to happen? I've spent all this time saving up all this money and working hard to do it. What's supposed to happen with my wealth now? And I think, again, at a time of year in which we can be thankful for so many things, another strong year of returns, at least through the week of Thanksgiving, is a clear way to say, hey, maybe now's the time to have one of those conversations. With that, we enjoy doing the program for you. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you for listening to Money Talk with Bob Landaas. If you have a financial question you want answered on next week's show, email it to moneytalk@landaas.com. To keep informed throughout the week, visit our Money Talk page at landaas.com.